John, for me, I think this is a credit to you and your team's organisation. You've got 230 people here, not at the moment, but I think that's just a credit to the way you, Andrew, and everyone else have thrown yourself at the task of creating an environment which is both entertaining and also professionally important for the IPA, but also it brings a wider and more diverse group of people into contact with the practitioners, and it's something that I'd have to say I would have really relished as a legal practitioner in my time, both as a private practitioner and then later a DPP. Look, my main purpose is to welcome you to the campus of the University of Tasmania. It's John wanted me to wear my gown, and I said no bloody way, and he emailed back and said that's probably a good idea, and we really at the university are very pleased with the way in which the IPA has engaged and the way in which the university has engaged with the IPA. It's hugely important. I think universities used to be quite aloof. The only engagement they ever had with universities in the community was to see a bunch of out-of-control students going through town either protesting or having a commemoration day parade, and I participated in a couple of those. One to my great regret when I was later fined by the Students' Representative Council for allegedly bringing the union into disrepute. And we won the prize for the best float, which was £1, and the fines that the two of us were subjected to was 10 shillings each, and we paid the fine with the prize for the float. Little did they know that one day this bastard would be Chancellor of the university, but anyway, look, it's very important to me, engagement. I think this university is well positioned to do it, and one faculty in particular does it so well. And Gary, if I could just acknowledge the way you and Sue and everyone else engage with the professional community in a confident and I think improving way. It's a great credit to you, and you know, we're very, very pleased to see what you've done. So well done, and thank you. I've got a couple of things I wanted to say that are a little bit off track. I was told to make this amusing, and you know, when you throw in a white-haired old fart who's a Chancellor of a university who interrupts good drinking, then you've got to actually ultimately be amusing if you can. First of all, let's acknowledge the day. It is the 24th of May. We used to let off a lot of fireworks until some pretentious took that out of our midst. But it's Queen Victoria's birthday. That's why we let off fireworks. It was called Empire Day. Good old Queen Vic was born on the 24th of May. There were two other terribly important people born on that day. One is Bob Dylan, who I think ought to be acknowledged as the most popular poet of the 20th century. He's lost his touch a bit lately. And the other is my father, who I could never work out why we're always letting fireworks off on the old man's birthday until... but anyway, that's how it worked out. Look, I said once before when I spoke at this function that it's important to read the program because you need to know what's going on at a conference. And when I spoke last time, I was after dinner speaker at Coles Bay, and I noticed that there was half an hour CPE points for me speaking after dinner. And I look at the bloody program tonight, and you're not getting any points for listening to me. So I'm surprised any of you are still in the room. And that, I think, entitles me to speak completely off cuff, if you don't mind. I wanted to just talk about a couple of things because, as I say, it's important to read the program so you know what you're talking at, because I know a really good friend of mine in the law, a woman who was told she should come along and speak at a bar convention about, and she understood them to speak about breastfeeding and the law. And she'd run a busy life as a barrister with a couple of young kids and expressed and all this sort of thing, so she prepared this detailed speech about it, and when she turned up she was introduced and said, "This is so-and-so, and I'll tell you her name if I have another drink, who's here to speak about press freedom and the law." And And so you've really got to, there's a book out in the law called Forensic Fables, and it's a sort of the do's and don'ts if you're practicing law and the lessons you'll learn from life. And there's one called Little Effie, and she was the subject of a child custody case. And this fable about Effie is that the judge could see she was ill at ease, this 7-year-old kid, and he invited her and the parties into the chambers and tried to settle this kid by, try on my wig and see how that feels. And Effie paraded in front of the mirror with the wig, and they got back out into court, and the judge started to read the papers to see just what he had to deal with, and he discovered that she had a ghastly case of head lice. And the lesson in that forensic fable is read your brief first, and sometimes we do. Now look, I just want to, as I say, you're not getting any CPE points for this, so I've got a folder at home. I've always seen the lighter side of the serious aspects of the law, and as things have happened that I've found amusing, I've thrown them into this folder, so I pulled a few out tonight, and I just want to regale you with a couple. I wrote a letter to Dame Barbara Mills QC, who was the DPP for England, when she was given the equivalent of a knighthood, and she was made Dame Barbara Mills on New Year's Day 1997. So I wrote to her and I said, "Dear Barbara, I was so pleased to hear that your contribution to the law has been acknowledged in such a fitting way. Congratulations. I should actually say welcome to the club, as I've been a Dame Ian since birth," but she didn't acknowledge the bloody letter. Then, when a northern businessman, Edmund Rouse, attempted to bribe a member of parliament to cross the floor and bring the government down in 1989, there was an airline pilot strike on, and we flew to Melbourne in a Hercules to negotiate with the Victorian authorities to facilitate the easy movement of the case to Tasmania. And John Coldry, who was then the DPP, who shall go down in infamy as saying that when Jim Kennan, who was then the Attorney General, rang him up and said, "John, how would you like to be the next DPP?" Coldry has publicly said, "At the time I thought, DPP, the only thing you'd think that meant was dancing pot." And he said, "Mr. Attorney, I can't dance." And so Coldry, who was a pretty classy hockey player, said, "Damian, if you want a game, bring your hockey gear with you because the bar is playing the Law Institute." And I got over there with all this gear, having humped it onto the bloody Hercules. And anyway, Coldry said, "Look, we've had a meeting and we think the Law Institute bunch of will play it so hard that if we have a ring in and we beat them, they won't give us the cup." And so I stood on the sideline. Coldry played a cracking game. They won, the bar did. And Coldry, after the game, I heard his voice coming through the slatted windows of the shower, and he said, Damian. I said, "What is it?" And he said, "I didn't bring a change of underpants. You wouldn't be able to loan me a pair of yours because I've got all my gear with it." So I did, and I thought, I don't know this bloke that well, actually, but, not that you loan anyone your underpants. Anyway, I forgot about that, and about 2 weeks later, a brown envelope appeared on my desk through the mail delivery, but it had been opened and had been inexpertly resealed with sellotape. And inside my underpants with this. And it's from the office of the DPP of Victoria, but it says, "Dear Damian, I found these in my car after the drive-in. Love, Suzette." I rang Coldry and said, all my mail, personal or official, is opened in the mail room. And I said, "Thank you very much." I said to my secretary, "Let's give it a little while before we sort this out because I don't want this to happen again." So 6 months later, she went down to the mail room and said, "Look, any mail that comes in for Damian that's marked personal or private, could you leave it?" And they said, "Oh, this is to do with the underpants, is it?" They have a long memory in the mail room. In private practice, I had this really fabulous secretary who just, anticipated everything and made you look a lot better than you really were. And she went on holiday, and we went to a temporary agency and said, "Have you got a secretary?" She turned up, and she had sort of long flowing robes that sort of... no. There was an aroma that emanated from them that was obviously impregnated by smoking a substance that wasn't tobacco. And she had earrings that were the tail feathers of a peacock, and said "man" a lot and things like that. And so I left. I arrived at work on her second morning there early because I was doing a trial in the criminal court, and there was a lady sitting on the steps of the office at about 7:45, and she was in tears. And I said, "What's the problem?" She said, "I've just been let out of custody. I was arrested last night. Here's the charge sheet. I've got to appear in court at 10 o'clock. And I said, "Well, I can't help you. I've got to go to court, but come in, talk to me." She was really distressed, so I took her instructions. She'd been charged over an incident outside a hotel with disturb the peace by fighting. And so I dictated everything to my secretary with the earrings, and then dictated some etiquette guidelines that I'd just drafted for the Bar Association. I was president of the Bar Association at the time. And I said, "Give all that to Stephen Knight, who is now the senior partner at that firm." And I said, "Stephen will fix it all up and send it off." Stephen met me coming back from the court and said, "Look, I saved you from a really embarrassing situation today." And I said, "What was that?" And he said, "Well, I actually read very carefully what your new temp has typed." And she typed up etiquette guidelines as air ticket guidelines. And if you think about the problems they're having in Canberra with the slipper affair at the moment, what an embarrassment that would have been. But it got better because she had typed up disturb the peace by fighting as disturb the peace by farting. And when he pointed out that she'd misunderstood, she said, "I come from New South Wales and the cops up there are terrible, but I thought, Christ, I'll get you for anything down in Tasmania." So the practice of any profession is challenging, and it can be a lot of fun. And I think you've always got to try and see the funny side of things, and otherwise you go crazy because you are expected to work under enormous pressure. I really do think that the organisers of this annual event are to be congratulated, because not only do they blend a great mixture of professional training and improvement and enhancement, but they also put a lot of fun into it, and that's really the way you should do it. Work hard, don't play too hard, but play hard. Sometimes you get into tense situations. I had to prosecute a bloke down here once who'd cut his ears off when he was in Melbourne, Mark Brandon Reid, and Mark writes books, and he tries to get you into a sort of a correspondence web, and Mark wrote a lot of letters to me, none of which I responded to. But I thought I'd share with you the Christmas card he sent to me from Her Majesty's Prison Risdon in 1995. "My dear Damian, may the Yuletide log fall from your fireplace and burn your house down. Wishing you jingle bells and much Christmas, yo ho ho." He's quite an interesting man. I think that just about finishes my speech. It's a pretty hard act to follow, but I think that when I became Commonwealth DPP, I became distressed at the fact that people saw the prosecution of Commonwealth crime as being really prosecuting people for parliamentary regulation that they had either resisted or not felt sufficiently enthusiastic to comply with. And I came home from Canberra one Friday and I saw this sandwich board saying 86-year-old pensioner sent to jail. And I thought, oh God, he's going to die while... It was a social security fraud, and I thought, God, we don't really prosecute popular, sort of community popular offences, and the sentences always seem so appalling. Anyway, I was driving about 2 weeks later down the street and I saw a sandwich board for another Commonwealth offence that had been sentenced. And I went in and I said, can I get that sandwich board? Because I thought it was one of the most adventurous pieces of sentencing I'd ever seen. Breast implants for $500,000 fraudster, and I thought, wow, you know. If it's a woman, she'll be happy. If it's a bloke, he won't be. And it turned out that some of the proceeds of the $500,000 fraud had been spent enhancing this lady's silhouette, and it looked as if that was the sentence, you know, and I thought, wow. Yeah. Who was the adventurous judge who did that? Anyway, I see the funny side sometimes of things that I shouldn't, but I think I've interrupted the flow of what is really wonderful entertainment here tonight. I want to welcome you to the university. I think it's a great idea, John, to say town meets gown, gown meets town. It's important. It's very important. Most of you have either attended a university or have family at a university. I think we play an important part in the commercial and social life of every community in Australia, but I think you play just as significant a part. I wish you all the very best with the practice of your profession, and thank you for being here.